Welcome to Surviving Saturday, a podcast about holding on to hope in the midst of life's difficulties, disappointments, and dark seasons.
Times like that remind us of the agony and despair the followers of Jesus felt on the Saturday of Easter weekend, in between the Friday on which he was crucified and the Sunday on which he rose from the dead.
That Sunday forever changed the way that humans can relate to God. But what does it look like to be honest about the very real pain we experience in the in-between?
To fervently cling to hope in the God who promised us his peace and his presence, at times when he feels distant or even cruel.
I'm Wendy Osborne, a licensed counselor in Charlotte, North Carolina.
And I'm her husband, Chris, a marriage mediator, conflict resolution coach, and trauma-informed storywork coach.
Join us each episode for authentic conversations about how life not turning out as we'd expected has created the contextual soil for the growth of a tenacious hope in the resurrection and in a God who is still making all things new. Hi, we are back. I'm Wendy.
And I'm Chris.
We are going to pick up where we left off last time when we were having a hard conversation in Seattle. And Chris, I shared most of the time last time, so I wanted to hear if we back it up to the beginning of that conversation that had happened when I finished the spa and you'd been doing some work while I was occupied. What was it like for you?
Yeah, so to set the stage a little bit, I was thrilled to get to come with you just for a little weekend getaway before your whole week of spa care and body work and kind of the good work you were doing.
Yeah, it was therapeutic, not I wasn't just
spa. That's right. I don't want to give that impression. And to do that, I had work I needed to do. I worked out on the plane, and then I had a couple things I need to deal with on Friday morning. And so for me, I was excited because you are off, exploring the stone therapy and all that. And I knew you were going to kind of be relaxed. I was going to shift into, hey, we're here to have fun. This is our vacation sort of mode. And the tasks that I ended up working on that morning, there was one in particular that was just one of those that just kept being more difficult. It wasn't a quick win. Let me just do this thing and knock it off my list. It was actually a client starting to have some different challenges or whatever that were going to be more difficult to navigate. I couldn't just, put it away easily. And that, I think, I did feel a little stressed by that, and I was expressing that. And the weird thing is, at the same time, another thing that engaged me was a friend of mine who I'd been wanting to get together with for a while, had agreed to go to a concert that we were going to go to out of town. And they were communicating from their work, and I was communicating on this Wi-Fi. So we were trying to make arrangements, like, hey, if we're going to go, when are we going to go, where are we going to stay, what are we going to do? And there's all these different factors to be decided. And one of the things I know that you have experienced in me, when I am making some decisions, it is possible for me to get sort of lost in the details and to get too much down the rabbit hole of, well, what about this, and to overthink it. And I think my friend was a little bit that way as well. We couldn't just go, we'll just do this and make it simple. We had to keep having some back and forth going. So when you came back in the room, I was partly, this other task is, this situation is getting more problematic, and I don't like that, and I think I expressed that. And then I also was saying, hey, my friend is in connection or is in communication, and we're trying to figure that out too. But I can see how that's two things where I'm engaged elsewhere, and might not have met your expectations of, hey, when I come in, boom, we're right off to the races.
Yeah, I'm curious as I hear you say that, what's usually your response to futility? What's that like for you?
Well, it's not great. I don't like futility. I don't like expending effort that is wasted and goes nowhere, which is probably part of what I had already been feeling a little bit that morning with one of the clients that I was doing some good work for, and they're losing their ability to appreciate, shall we say, that good work had been done and taking a different perspective and starting to take it out of me. So that was probably in the mix a little bit. I don't think I felt as futile or frustrated with us at this point.
Yeah, I'm just meaning in general, because you spoke to it with that work project.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, what do you know about yourself that is usually your response to a situation that involves futility or just a lot of obstacles where you can't be effective?
I'll say that my first response, usually my go-to, is I power up and I try to get more thoughtful, and I tend to think, oh, if I just explain this different or better. So I think I go to words, and I probably increase my volume of words, and I probably I've noticed if I'm getting frustrated in a situation that's a work kind of thing, and I'm writing stuff, I start taking on almost a more different tone. I start sounding like a British professor, kind of condescending, like if you will listen, I will explain, blah blah blah. And sometimes I can catch myself doing it, but I tend to think more information is going to fix the problem, and it's only when I start running into it doesn't, like the person, whether it's you or somebody else, isn't persuaded by my wonderful words, that's when I can start to get exasperated. And so it can either come out sometimes as anger, frustration, or I might also reach a point where I just sort of shut down. And
I was going to ask you if you attach an emotion to the exasperation, if it was more despair or if it was more anger or an attempt to control.
Yeah, I think in the situation with my work thing that I was working on, it was definitely more anger and an attempt to control. And I was kind of working through that. What you caught me in the middle of was me just sort of expressing, dang it, this thing that I thought was going to be simple, a quick win, a quick hit, is not going to be. And so at that point, I was just trying to name, this has been frustrating, and this kind of frustration is part of what I don't like about what I do as a lawyer.
Yeah.
I think it was, and I think, that sort of landed on, we've been having conversations of that nature a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I would say because I had the friend thing going on at the same time, I wasn't, just stuck in the frustration with the client thing. I was like, oh man, this trip is going to work out that I'm super excited about. And I want to strike while the iron's hot. I didn't want this guy to, back out or decide to do something different. And so I think that made for some awkwardness for us as I stopped the work I was doing and we went to go get lunch. But I was still communicating with my friend. Like, I was leaving behind the work thing, but I was communicating with my buddy about, hey, what are we going to do, where are we going to do? And that I know that intruded on our lunch a little bit. Mm-hmm. And I know this, I didn't get a sense at that time that anything had started working on you yet. I feel like I was probably kind of oblivious, and I was thinking, hey, we're on our way to the fun part of the afternoon.
Yeah.
And so then what happened is we were having a discussion about, okay, we're going to go walk, and I was willing to let go of, the planning and say, hey, we'll figure it out later. And you, I think wisely said, I'm concerned, that you'll be returning to it, thinking about it, and I want you to be all present for our time. Mm-hmm. And so you said, hey, go and finish that communication loop and make what plans you can. And I said, okay, it'll take 15 minutes, and left you kind of sitting out in this little courtyard waiting before we go to walk.
Uh-huh.
And so I did that. It took probably 5 or 10 minutes longer. And I know that's a frustration. That's a frustration point often for us. I having ADHD, I don't have naturally have a good assessment of time and how long things take. Try to work on that, trying to get better at it, obviously. But my thinking when I came out to find you was, you've been sitting in the sun. You're relaxing. You had relaxed with the stones in the morning. I'm thinking you're ready for a fun afternoon. My deck is cleared. I'm ready for a fun afternoon. And so that's what I thought. We were walking literally off into the woods in this state park near where we're staying. And I think that's where you said you did have something you wanted us to talk about, but I thought it meant just you had a topic, like something, this will be interesting. But the conversation sort of went a different direction than I expected. Do you remember what we ended up talking about?
I think it was just some big decisions that were on the horizon that we needed to make, some things we needed to nail down.
Yes.
And those were on my mind. And I think that when you had spoken to the futility of your morning, that had attached to a memory that recalled these decisions.
Okay.
That were in the queue for us. And so that's what I then started thinking about.
Okay. And so where one of the things that was challenging for us is you didn't speak to the other things that had started to work on you, like, starting to feel critical of yourself or some of that disappointment. And it felt like that energy got put on these decisions, whether you meant it to or not. But it left me sort of, we're starting off, and I'm thinking, it's Friday afternoon, you've been off, I'm about to be off, we're done, we're going into, let's enjoy each other. And we didn't, it would have helped us if we had just had a pause and said, what kind of conversation we're about to have? Where are we going, what are we doing? And when you went into the decision stuff and you were coming from, it felt to me like a place of criticism and impatience and frustration. And impatience isn't the right word. You've been ridiculously patient through a lot of these decisions. But it felt like, that's where it felt like a blindside to me. Like, oh no, I thought this was rest time, fun time. You got these things on your mind. And I think I felt, I'm not saying you were doing this, but I felt attacked at that point. And then I started reacting.
Can you pause there? What is attacked to you? What does that mean when you say, I felt attacked?
That's a harsh word. Yeah, I know.
No, I was just curious.
Yeah. It felt like criticism of me and focusing on ways that I hadn't made the decisions, or I had left us in a position where we had to make difficult decisions or something. It felt like I was sort of called to the principal's office.
So, are you saying that like some shame was popping up?
I would say shame was popping up, yes. And where I was trying to get to was, fair questions to raise. I was thrown off by the timing, and then it felt like, to me at least, more intensity. And I don't know that my first response was shame. My first response was probably that exasperation, futility, like, oh my gosh, I had difficult conversations this morning, and now I've got to do it again, and I thought this was my off time. So that was sort of my first reaction. And it was kind of like, haven't we been over this? Haven't we talked through this a lot? And we have a plan as far as we can get today. I think it was like February, 7th, 8th, whatever. We couldn't decide anything that Friday afternoon. It was already 5 o'clock on the East Coast, so if we had to do anything back here, we really couldn't.
Right.
And so I didn't think, it was more, I didn't realize we were going there. And I think the shame then kicked in when you were pointing out right and good, true things, but in order to be heard, it felt like you were only majoring on those pieces of it. And so that's where I started to feel probably shame, and that came into what I was communicating. Yeah.
Yeah, so, we have different styles of handling protest when we want our needs to be met, and also different styles around decision making.
And different styles around identifying needs and naming them.
Yeah.
I think that,
yeah.
I think that's still a journey that we've been on, of learning to be able to identify our needs and articulate them along the way, instead of waiting until they sort of build up.
Yeah.
And we get sort of an overload. Now I've got needs, and I'm going to tell you all of them, and we both can kind of do that.
Yeah. So I was just thinking, like, tracing it, the way I'm at least conceptualizing it,
Yeah.
is I had gone down to have this massage. My body and my mind were very relaxed. I was so grateful you would come out with me for a couple of days. And I was feeling, I was anticipating just connecting.
Yes.
And having time together in a beautiful place.
Yes.
And then I came in the room, and my vigilance level of what's going on around me tends to run pretty high.
Yes.
That's just been a lifelong superpower that I've honed since I was little. And so I could pick up on the exasperation when you made your comment about, this is what's so hard about my work. And I felt in that a disconnection because it was different. I could tell that our connection was different than I'd hoped.
Yes.
There was something in between us. There was this exasperating experience you had had beforehand.
Yeah.
And so when I felt that, my tendency, if it goes unchecked, I move into believing that it's safer to isolate. So to not continue to move toward you
Right.
for connection.
Right.
Because I felt the obstacle between us as rejection. then so that's when I start turning against myself, and it will
Sure.
often land on my physical appearance, and that's a very embodied, in-storied thing for me.
Yes.
But it basically is me saying it's safer to be alone. Why was I so foolish? That's me, my self-talk.
And is there an aspect of it when you say the turning on yourself? Because that, I think, might be an important concept for people to understand, and for me to learn to understand. What do you make of the turning of yourself, turning on yourself? When,
Yeah,
how dare I hope? How dare I believe I'm desirable?
So when I came up the stairs from the spa, my heart was full of hope about how our afternoon was going to be together, and I was moving toward connection with you as my husband, just letting my heart be open. And then when I felt your exasperation, even though I knew it had nothing to do with me, the turning against myself, I had been standing with myself, like believing in my hope, trusting in the potential.
Yeah.
And so then it happens in a nanosecond for me. I realized, this isn't going to start out, at least, the way that I so much was looking forward to.
Right.
And so then, without even realizing it, without even taking a beat, I began to act out of this concept of I was foolish to hope. Who's ever really going to choose me over their exasperation, over the realities of obstacles in life?
Yes.
And so because my physical self has known a lot of pain and criticism, that is a natural place for me to land it.
Okay, so it sort of joins with, in some ways, messaging from your family of it's going to be for these reasons that you will be rejected,
which
etc.
weren't necessarily explicitly stated, but close enough. So I was thinking, I come in with all of that. You have been in this exasperating situation, and you've said you tend to power up. And so I could just feel the heightened emotions.
Yeah.
And then as I continued to ask a little bit later after lunch, well, we really need to make these decisions, you felt more exasperation and then shame. So I'm wondering then what that then brought to the interaction with me.
Well, and I want to offer an observation first before I kind of go that direction. What I'm noticing, and what's fascinating to me, is we both had that same desire. Like, if you could get in our heads, what did we both want? It was, let's have connection. We're spending time together. We're doing this on purpose.
That's why we decided you'd join me.
Exactly.
That was our whole plan.
We stepped away from this busy, season that we've had, and it was a good, kind of break for me, and a really needed break for you. And I think it fascinates me that how we can easily get tripped up. You can say the enemy's at work, whatever, but two people who want the same thing and yet run into our stories that sort of become obstacles. And it's maddening because, we know we want the same thing at the core, but we have both these obstacles that we run into.
Yes.
So I would say, for me, I had the hope that, I've been focusing on my work, but you've been taking care of yourself, and you've been sitting in the sunshine, and I was presuming that you're still in that same relaxed place. Mm-hmm. And so when we started the conversation, and you were approaching topics that we've talked about a lot, but you were in a more fearful place and a more concerned place, and less of the supportive, hey, this has been hard, we're figuring it out, whatever. And so that's, I think, where my heart started to sink. Mm-hmm. And that's where I got exasperated. And I started communicating in a very, I can remember the feeling of impatience, frustration. And what the spiral starts for me is, and this is very in-storied for me, is I'll never be listened to. Mm-hmm. And I won't be honored enough for somebody to stay with me. My story is characterized by either kind of an outright abandonment, that's more my dad, or a lot of reversals, where somebody is really for me, really supporting me, really with me, and then all of a sudden something happens, the wind shifts, there's a change, maybe I do something, maybe I don't, and all of a sudden I am the demon, I'm the evil in their life. And I got a lot of that, and it's taken me a while to figure out, not everybody does that, but some of my formative relationships were characterized that way. So I start feeling like, oh, here it goes again. I am discardable. I am, and if I am feeling like I've done anything to merit, that there's a point to somebody not being happy with me, then that can trip the shame. Like, I am discardable, and I knew it. Who would want me anyway? Which is sort of a deeper level of it.
Yeah.
And somehow that got pricked there, because I remember by the end of this walk, I was pretty hot, and I was like, whatever, what the blank ever, I'll just do X, Y, Z. I just wanted relief from the conversation and the, it was probably our most beautiful walk, scenery wise and the weather wise that we got, and we didn't enjoy it.
Yeah.
Because we were missing each other, and we weren't able to stop and go, hey, how did we get here? We were just off to the races.
Yeah. And I think when one of us was trying, the other was caught in fear or despair.
Yes. And then we took kind of a break. To our credit, I think we didn't stay hacking at it, but we'd kind of gotten to a level of sort of standoff. And then we kind of took a break. I want to hear what your break was like, or where you went during the break. For me, I went and said, well, relationship's not available. I'll go back into sort of productivity mode, get stuff done. So I went and did some of my schoolwork for class, and was trying to kind of just, settle and calm and just take my mind off of it. And then I came back to the room.
I found, because our room didn't have a lot of channels, I found Dateline. And I love that show. But I think what it provided that day was it gave a landing place for all this angst that I felt internally. And it gave a scenario in which all of that fear and passion made such sense.
Because you're watching stories of, these horrible crimes and figuring out, like, somebody's getting away with stuff and disguising themselves and all this.
Yeah, so, I have friends who love horror movies, and they've realized through the years that a lot of it helps them deal with the internalization of the fear of the scary world we live in. So it's like, now I can be scared, but in a way that I'm choosing.
Yes.
Versus the world just feels scary.
Yes.
And so I think for me, all this angst that I didn't want to be feeling and felt unsolvable in the moment had a place to go. And so I was cheering on the detectives, and I was horrified about what this perpetrator had done. And yeah, it was actually a lovely hour or so.
Well, and it's fascinating to me because I think it helped me, the work I was doing for school and the reading I was doing was actually helpful. It sort of brought me back around at least a little bit to, at that point it was helpful. Another thing that I go to sometimes when I feel overwhelmed with futility is I'll go to like a game on my phone or something that, smart people play. That basically I know the rules. I can I play Word Wars. It's a version of Scrabble, but it's like I know the rules. I know how to score big points. I can beat anybody who comes to me, and I feel this rush of dopamine and confidence.
So your power is effective there.
Yes. Oh, yes. Because I'm basically what I've realized is I am looking for a world that I can dominate with either my intellect or my wit or my words or something.
Yeah.
And even just a little hit, it doesn't satisfy as much. In fact, there's another game that one of our kids got me into that's called Nonograms, and you moving these shapes around and all this stuff, and I realized it doesn't have the same dissociative power, which is good because it gives you negative feedback, not just the good feedback.
Oh.
You have these sort of, you hit the wrong thing, and it kind of
it's more phone, like real life.
It is. The phone kind of shakes, and you kind of get, you have to start over. And I actually feel myself, oh crap, And then it doesn't have the same. So it's actually a safer game to play. I don't get lost playing it because I fail enough, and I'm like, this is no fun. This is too much like my life. But I think, so what happened, I came back into the room. I've been doing school. I didn't know what you had been doing. You were watching Dateline, so I just kind of got in the bed beside you. I think I sat and watched it, and I kind of fell asleep. But nobody was making any bids to try to reconnect at that point. And then we said, let's go to dinner. And I think I remember then I did come, and sit beside you while we're putting on shoes or something to try to reconnect.
Yeah.
And then my perspective was it didn't work or it didn't happen or we didn't get there. And then we ended up having a worse conversation at dinner and kind of ended up really still dysregulated. We couldn't get to each other. And I was sort of being pushy and exasperated, I know.
Yeah, I think sometimes it takes a while, and sometimes we've learned we have to put away the words.
Yes.
And not ignore the content of what's between us.
Right.
It's not a movement to denial or that's just her, that's just him, move on, because resentment can breed in that space.
Yes.
But a break where you can connect, we can connect without the words.
Yes.
Often is helpful.
Yes, and that was a big deal for us to realize that because we're both go to words of some sort, and we both have some training and background, and there's a part for me is an exasperation. Oh, we should know better than this. Come on, and yet at times we just have to. It's a humble thing to recognize our words aren't fixing it right now, and no matter how well one or the other might be trying.
Because it's important just to remember it. Of course, we know better.
Yeah.
It's not a matter of knowledge. It's a matter of when these stories and these experiences that are still very much alive in our body get tripped, get triggered.
Yes.
We're back in that place.
Yes. And I think what ended up happening for me is the way the conversation went at dinner and we just didn't get reconnected. That's where I sort of then I felt overwhelmed and I was deep in my story. You went on to bed and I went outside and just sort of had to have some alone time and I was in kind of a spin, but I did sort of, rage at God a little bit and reach out and try to, look, I'm going to feel stuff. I'm going to name what I'm feeling. And I was able to name, I know I've felt like this before. I hate this feeling with all my body. I was able to feel it more as I identified, wait, where have I felt this before? Oh yeah. I know when I felt this before. This is a childhood thing. This is very much in storied, and being able to feel that and name that helped me then. Know this is not the same though. I'm not in the same position I was. I'm not a kid. I'm not in a power differential. This is a peer. This is a person whose heart is good and who I know loves me. But we can't access that love for each other and putting each other first right now. But we will again. That was my sort of moment of I went through that feeling. I was foolish. Why am I trusting any of this for a minute? I kind of got on that spin. I think later than you on that I'm a fool. I should not be a fool. I need to start acting really self-protectively. And it took a little bit of cycling through that and then kind of going back, and I started. Thankfully, again, reading a really good book for my school at that point that was actually reminding me of big picture and like, hey, Osborne, there's more than what you can see. Don't forget, which is super helpful, although I don't always welcome that thought, but that's what I need sometimes. I need a reminder there is more than what I can feel and see right now, particularly when this flood of emotion is unleashed in me. And I've been trying to manage it, and I sort of, part of the reason I will take blame for why this fight went kind of on the rails, I sort of quit being a governor and I just started just unleashing stuff to a degree that I probably hadn't in a while, and it was not fair or right. That's at least the ownership I would take of that. I think I quit trying to pause, and I was just like, this is just messed up, and I was just unleashing, and it took a while, and what I loved that we did after that was we were able to pause, and we kind of figured out a plan for something that would be helpful to do on Sunday to deal with stuff, but we let Saturday be kind of let's go back to that sort of side by side, let's enjoy something and agree to not have to go there to the hard places. And that's a newer skill for us, relatively speaking. Yeah,
to take the break. I was thinking, as you were saying all that, I think it's Deb Dana, who is a neuropsychotherapist that's done a lot of work around polyvagal theory.
Yes.
Stephen Porges. I think it's her. She has this phrase, state before story.
Ooh, tell me about that.
She's talking about when you're dysregulated, the meaning you're going to apply to what's happening is likely going to be in line with past experiences.
Okay.
And oftentimes, if you've gotten triggered in the context of an argument, those are going to be more negative, or possibly, especially in our cases, even more on the traumatic end.
Yes.
That's true
Yeah.
for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Just lowercase t trauma for a lot of us. But if we can do the hard work of getting back to a place of emotional regulation or sanity, then we can see, okay, the story of what is happening here right now is only what is happening here right now.
Yes,
it's not actually what I've known in reenactments or repetitions. It's not what happened when I was 5 that makes me foolish to trust.
Yes.
So it's this idea of, depending on the emotional state that you are in, you will weave a story.
That is brilliant.
Parallel to that.
Well, it's brilliant. It reminds me of what we hear in the intensives or in the counseling room sometimes as well. I had a couple I was working with recently on some conflict, and they were sharing that basically one of them had a reaction to something, and the other one jumped in like, well, that's just the story you're telling yourself. Okay? Which is, the person wasn't necessarily wrong, but they weren't in a state to deliver that message, and the other person was not in a state to receive that message.
Yes.
It's what you and I run into often is we will have an insight or a thought like, oh, I know what you're doing, I know what the problem is, but if we start speaking to that and declaring it for the other person, it does not go over well.
Right.
Partly because we're trying to push and fix, but partly because the other person is still in their state.
Yeah.
And when we're in
it feels more like a threat than a help.
And when we're in a dysregulated state, we don't even receive care. It's sometimes it's hard for either of us to trust, oh, you're coming to me now. Maybe this could be good and care, or are you just trying to get me another way? Are you just, because we have those heightened, you use the word hypervigilant, and it describes me as well. We're like, wait a minute, well, I know you could be trying to come at me and still trying to get what you want and deny what I want. So the state, focusing on the state and re-regulating, and that's got to be a thing that each person takes charge of. You can't do it for the other person or force them to do it.
It is all about what level of arousal our nervous system is operating at.
Yes.
Because when we feel like the other is coming, like, quote, to get us, that's generally because we've been hijacked.
Yes.
By, a trigger.
Right. The amygdala is in control.
It's not that really we have a basis to think he or she is coming after me to do me harm. Yeah.
And I think one of the things that's new, at least for me, is in recent years, and I think it's been hard for you, I know, but I've ceased or haven't been able to manage my emotions the same as I often did, and some of that was shutting them down, and I have experienced more overwhelm, frustration. I've sort of lost my mind a little, sometimes in communicating with you and sometimes away from you, but I have experienced that sense of overwhelm, and my brain has just gone to shit, basically. And I've experienced enough to go, gosh, I don't like that. I hope I can recognize when it's happening. It probably was happening a lot more than I was aware of, is probably the reality. But I've been aware of, I am out of my gourd, like in this moment. I am so in fight or flight. I am so, or sometimes I'm so in shutdown. Like I've experienced the overwhelm turning into freeze.
Yeah.
That I had not experienced before too, because my sort of mantra was, you keep going.
Yeah.
You figure out what to do. I will find a way to dazzle or talk or charm or force my way out of this. I'll pick some of any number of tools in my arsenal to get away from this pain. And for me, the journey in the last few years, as we've done stuff with Anderson in particular, has been sit with the pain. Yeah. Let it have some weight and let it not be manageable. And that has been scary as hell. And it has been super helpful.
Yeah.
Because I can sort of go, okay, that's starting to happen. I know where that ends up. I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I don't want to end up completely disconnected from, my frontal lobe and my, my ability to see the big picture. But I think I had to sort of fall apart some and taste that depth of shame, depth of overwhelm. And what's that been like for you to be alongside me as I've been doing that?
Yeah, so I mean, I do agree it's probably happening more than, it's always for both of us.
Sure.
I was probably seeing it more than you were aware.
Yes.
But it's really hard to see you get stuck and frozen.
Yeah.
And to lose hope. Feeling overwhelmed in and of itself. While it makes me sad to see you there, I can hang with it, but it's when it takes you to a place of despair.
Yeah.
It's really hard to see.
And
I don't like to think of you being there.
Yeah. And we've talked about, we keep being, it feels like sometimes we're in a divine psych experiment. We keep getting moments that I think Jesus is using to build empathy.
Yeah.
So we can go, oh, wait, I know what that feels like. Because I think that was part of what, in this discussion, if I'm remembering right, I may be mixing up with another one, part of what got stirred up was you were expressing sort of feelings of, I've carried everything, I've been the strong one in recent times. And I'm like, well, yeah. And I feel like that was the opposite other times, where I was the strong one. And but we weren't using it first to build a bridge of, oh my gosh, we can understand each other better. It was more like, damn it, it's my turn, or know, and well, too bad, I sucked it up and dealt
more in selfishness about both of us.
So I'm grateful that we did pause and we got some, we're able to talk to somebody else to kind of help us think through it, and just that state before story thing is really something I'm going to chew on, though, because I think there's a lot of wisdom in that, and that's something we can, wield well. Hey, honey, state before story. No, that's not how to deal with that.
Well, thanks for coming back again and sharing from your side. I think it's helpful even for us just to kind of step back through it to figure out what happened. So thanks.
Yeah, the beauty of it is that Jesus is writing a story, and if we lean in and we can remain open to that, it's fun to see what he can do.
Yes.
But if we lose sight of that, that's what gets challenging. Thanks for being with us.
See you next time.
The Surviving Saturday podcast is brought to you by Nurture Counseling PLLC, a counseling, teaching, and training center based out of Charlotte, North Carolina. We help families flourish one story at a time. Nurture Counseling provides counseling intensive for couples, conflict resolution coaching, story work groups, seminars, workshops, and retreats to provide a safe and welcoming context for exploring the agonizing experiences of pain, brokenness, and evil that disrupt our lives, and that God often uses to nurture deeper trust and intimacy with Him and with each other. You can find us online at www.nurturecounseling.net.